All right, hey, just wanted to check in because I finished another book. It's really four books, I think, in one. It's Four Past Midnight by Stephen King. Now, this is a collection of four of his novellas, all in this one book. It goes one past midnight, two past midnight, three past midnight, four past midnight. They're all four different stories, and I'm going to cover each of them a little bit here. There are a couple that stand out to me compared to the other two, so I think my passion might shine through a little extra on a couple of these, but regardless, let's just get into it. So the first story in this book is called The Langoliers, and I really enjoyed The Langoliers. It was probably my favorite of the four. It is about these passengers aboard this commercial flight. They're going from, I think it's like LA to Boston, and essentially, the main characters wake up in the middle of the flight, and most of the passengers are gone, besides a handful of them. And that includes the pilot as well. Thankfully, they have a man who is a trained pilot on board. So after they get the cockpit open, they are able to take control of the craft, and while they're flying over Denver, they look over and see that all the lights, there's no lights over Denver, where normally you would see, the street lights and the house lights and things like that. They don't see anything. There's nothing. It's blacked out, so they can't land the plane. They can't get a hold of anybody on the comms. They don't really know what to do. The pilot, the guy who took over as the pilot, his name's Brian, he decides that he's going to land them in Bangor, Maine, instead of Boston because of the runway and things like that. He thinks it'll be an easier landing. And their decision to land in Bangor instead of Boston really pisses off one guy in particular who has a meeting of some sort in Boston, and he thinks that all of the people on the plane are out to get him and they're fucking with him and they're the bad guys, and he goes a little bit crazy throughout the story. Actually, he goes very crazy throughout the story. So they finally touch down in Bangor, Maine, and there's nobody there either. It's pretty dead. The air feels weird. Everything smells like nothing. They have a hard time lighting matches. It's very strange. And one of the things that they also came to realize while they were on that flight is all of the people who made it through were asleep on the plane. So all of the people who are now missing were the ones who presumably were awake, just like the pilot would have been, and the others that aren't I think 11 people that made it through. So they made it through this weird warp hole in the sky is what they're assuming. And the only reason that they survived is because they were asleep. While they're on the ground, there's a blind girl who has this really good sense of hearing, and she says that she can hear this, it's almost like a Rice Krispie, the popping, out in the distance, and those are the Langoliers coming to get them. So they need to hurry up and get on the plane and reverse course back through that hole and see if they can get back to reality. So it's a really cool, interesting story. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to spoil any of these stories, but I'm going to just cover the basic of the story itself. So that is the premise, and I think it's really, really fun, really interesting. If anything, I have a similar issue with all four of these stories. All four of them have the issue of going on too long. They all have they have a lot of filler. A lot of this has a lot of filler. The third story I think is the worst about it in my opinion, but all of them have a good amount of filler. The second story was called Secret Window, Secret Garden, and this is about a man who is named Morton Rainey, and he is an author who eventually made it big, and he is divorced from his wife. He's living in his own little cabin area away from the house. It's like an hour out from the house where his ex-wife is currently living. She had cheated on him with another man, and obviously that things weren't working out, so he moved out. So he's at his cabin one day, and he's confronted by a man named John Shooter, who knocks on his door and says, "You plagiarized one of my stories. You're a piece of shit," pretty much. They go back and forth a little bit, and our main character, Mort, says, "Oh, well, I actually wrote that for a magazine before it was actually published in this book, so really I wrote it before you even thought." John Shooter gets upset about that and says, "Okay, you have 3 days to provide me proof of that magazine." You have 3 days. And John Shooter kills Mort's cat and puts a note on it, says you have 3 days. John Shooter also leaves a copy of his original manuscript behind, in which Mort compares the two and notices they are very, very similar. There's no doubt about the fact that one of them looks like they copied the other, at the very least. And so he just needs to get this proof of this magazine. Well, that is at his house that is an hour away with his wife. And when he calls his wife, he finds that their house just got burned down, and it started in his study. So he drives over, tries to goes through the wreckage a little bit, and obviously can't recover anything. He's freaking out. He's trying to call his agent to try to get a copy of the magazine in time because he doesn't know what else this crazy guy is going to do. He goes back to his cabin, and he knows John Shooter's in there somewhere. And there's this really cool scene, actually, of him going through the house, opening up doors, thinking he's behind the shower curtain. And it's really well written. I love the way that scene is written. It's very freaky, and it makes you feel tense the whole time. And there's a lot of those moments, actually, in this story in particular. But I'm not going to go too much further into this one because it will go into spoiler territory. Things do get crazy. There are twists and turns. It's a fantastic one as well. I really, really did enjoy these first 2 stories in 4 Past Midnight. The third story is possibly my least favorite thing Stephen King has ever written that I've read. I'm not a fan of The Library Policeman. I really like the concept, but then I hated the execution. So The Library Policeman is about a man who has a speech at this Rotary Club, which I looked it up. I had no idea what that was. I guess it's like a business people's success, one of those like fraud looking fucking clubs where they all just talk about empowering themselves and shit like that. I think it's one of those things. But he has a speech there, and he writes it out. It's like a 30-minute speech. He presents it to one of his office assistants, and she says, yeah, it's okay. It's good. It's just a little dry. Why don't you go to the library and check out a couple books on like poetry and maybe how to improve your speech a little bit, make it a little more entertaining. So he says, okay, I'll do that. He goes to the library, and it's this kind of weird feeling library. He talks to this old lady in there. Her name is Ardelia Lortz. Ardelia Lortz? Yeah. And she tells him, you have to return your library books on time, otherwise I'll send the library policeman after you. And while he's in this library as well, there are posters up that's return your library books on time or else, and it's these weirdly threatening pictures of just kind of unsettling situations and circumstances that is for this kid's library. And so he's already kind of off put, and then she mentions like, oh, I'll send the library policeman after you. He's okay. He gets out of there, uses the books to better improve his speech. It goes over well. He has a great speech, and he forgets to turn the library books back in. He actually loses them, and the library policeman gets sent after him. The library policeman visits his house. It's this big, scary man with a scar, and he's in his house at night. And it's a very unsettling situation. Again, I'm not going to go too much into it. It's a very good one to read. That part. Up until a point, I was very invested. The whole last 3/4 of this book is mostly our main character Sam going to another character named Dave and hearing Dave talk about Ardelia Lortz, the librarian, and how she's actually this dead woman that's a ghost. And he had all of these dealings with her prior, and it is a lot of unnecessary backstory that I think this story could have been really cool if it was like fucking 75% of its 50% of its size. It goes on a little long, and it has a lot of unnecessary details in it. But the concept is really cool. I like the idea of, hey, if you don't return your library book to this weirdly haunted library, then yeah, they're gonna send this phantom library policeman that's scary after you until they get their books back. I like that concept, but it was just executed a little poorly in my opinion. But I don't know. The last story is The Sundog, and I really enjoyed The Sundog as well, actually. So 3 of the 4 I thought were super good. All of them, like I said, have moments where they go on a little too long, though. But The Sundog is about a 15-year-old boy named Kevin who gets his first Polaroid camera for his 15th birthday, and he goes and takes some pictures. He takes a total of 28 pictures, I believe it was, and all of them aren't the pictures he was taking. All of the pictures that are coming out are of this dog from a different time, it almost looks like. And each picture, the dog is slowly kind of turning towards the camera. And he's kind of moving in a small, like a stop motion kind of way throughout these pictures. Kevin decides to take the camera to this junk antique guy who is kind of a sleazy guy, but he knows that he might be able to get some sort of information out of this guy, or he's kind of just looking for any sort of guidance. So he takes it to this man named Pop Merrill, and Pop Merrill tells him to go take 30 more pictures, and we'll see kind of what happens. We'll put them together. So he does. He takes 30 pictures throughout different times and different days, different locations, and they all still come back with this dog that's still slowly turning and slowly moving towards the camera. Pop Merrill then has a guy who takes the 58 pictures that they've taken or whatever and turns it into this like minute-long movie video of sorts. It's a stop motion thing of seeing the dog fully turn and start to go. And it's a very menacing, scary looking dog as well. So on top of it just being a dog, it's scary and it looks angry. Pop Merrill decides we need to destroy this camera. So he tricks Kevin by saying, "All right, I'm gonna let's destroy the camera." He swaps the camera out, destroys the fake camera, and holds on to his real camera and puts it away. He thinks he can make some money off of it. He talks to some people throughout the book and tries to kind of say, "Hey, do you like these ghost pictures?" Whatever. Nobody really buys it. Nobody really cares. But it's got a hold on Pop Merrill for sure. He has this supernatural attachment to it at this point where he's going and interacting with the camera, taking pictures with the camera without even knowing that he's doing it. And the dog is moving closer and closer. Well, Kevin is attached also supernaturally to this whole situation, and he's having these crazy dreams, and he knows that Pop Merrill still has the camera and is still interacting with it, and he knows that if the dog keeps getting closer and closer, he's going to kill Kevin. Something's going to happen to Kevin. This dog is turning into a monster with each passing click now. It's getting more and more frightening and more dire for them to stop taking these pictures, but Pop Merrill has the camera hidden away and is just doing it. So that is the premise of this story. There's also a lot of unnecessary little moments in this, the characters and stuff in this story as well. I think a lot of these could have been good, way better if they were shortened a little bit more, but maybe that's just me. Regardless, that's where I'm going to leave it with all 4 of those stories because I don't want to go into the spoiler territory on this. That's just kind of the premise that sets the ideas up. I really enjoyed all 4 of them, I'll be honest. Library Policeman I could have probably done without, or at least I could have shortened it by a lot. Overall, really enjoyed my time with it. I highly recommend checking it out, and especially if you're a Stephen King fan, there are more great Stephen King books. I think they're written in the late 80s to the early 90s. So anyways, I appreciate y'all for sticking around this long, and thanks.